So now let's talk about deacons. Again, as I said earlier, the word deacon comes from diakonos, or servant. And if you want to sort of read the origins, if you will, of the office or ordered ministry of deacons, go to the 6th chapter of Acts. And there's this wonderful story about a conflict in the early church. And the conflict was over a difference in how much food Greek-speaking widows got and Aramaic-speaking widows got. Because in Jerusalem, where the early church was initially focused, you had two groups of widows who had become followers of Jesus. You had those who were Aramaic-speaking, which meant they probably had friends and relatives there in the early church. And then you had Greek-speaking widows who had probably come from around the empire. They'd come to Jerusalem to live out the remainder of their lives. And what happened was the Aramaic-speaking widows, because they sort of had an in with the people in the church, were getting a bigger share of food. And so there were complaints from those who supported the Greek-speaking widows. And so what the church did was that they chose 7 men at that time, 7 men to wait on tables while the apostles went out and did the preaching and teaching and studying. These 7 deacons, they acted as table servants. They took care of ensuring that all widows got the same amount. And so with that in mind, what is the role, what is the function of deacons? And what I want to read to you, and I'm going to read it to you, is what the Book of Order has to say about this. The ministry of deacon, as set forth in Scripture, is one of compassion, witness, and service, sharing in the redeeming love of Jesus Christ for the poor, the hungry, the sick, the lost, the friendless, the oppressed, and those burdened by unjust policies or structures or anyone in distress. In other words, a deacon is to be a servant who looks both within the church and without the church to serve the least, the lost, and the lonely, and to have compassion on all. Now, the Board of Deacons, or as some people call it, the diaconate, the Board of Deacons can be assigned other job duties, other responsibilities by the session, and sometimes they're given the building and sometimes the finances. And that's okay because the deacons report to the session, to the Board of Elders. But ultimately, the critical role that deacons play is in some ways they are the heart of the church that reaches out in compassion to all who are in need.